So then moving on to the younger years. So this is kind of the teenager going up to sort of 21 kind of era. What was one of your favourite stories of your youth?
Wow.
Just think of one.
Think of one. It's very, very difficult. I think that I got lost when I was 18, 19. We're forgetting, we've missed out a bit in the fact that I got an American Field Service scholarship to go and study at American high school for a year. So I wrote my matric, which is, for those who don't know, a school leaving certificate, and I got exemption to go to university. And of course, I then went on to do sixth form, which is exactly the same as this in this country. It's Cambridge sixth form curriculum. And halfway through the year, while my parents had been overseas on a long leave for 5 months, we used to get long leave every 5 years in the old colonial days, I applied for and got this American Field Service scholarship to go to American high school, live with an American family for a year. Now, I didn't know anybody who'd ever been to America in those days. And although America's falling behind in the world in some cases, it certainly was much further advanced than the rest of the world at that stage. All teenagers had cars and all that sort of stuff. Had television. My God, it was the first time I'd seen television. I've been an addict ever since. And so I didn't see my parents except for one day in Frankfurt when I got drunk on martinis. I didn't see my parents basically for 18 months. And remember, there wasn't days of WhatsApp or anything like that. You know, you couldn't. I wrote 11 letters on those old blue air letter cards during that whole 18-month period. There were no pictures to exchange. We had one phone call at Christmas that lasted 3 minutes and was a saga in itself. So that meant I was dumped in an independent sort of situation very young. And although it sounds great, when we flew in an old Super Constellation prop plane into New York the day Marilyn Monroe died, and that was the headlines. We then got on a bus, and the bus took us all the way to Milwaukee, where I met my American family, which is a traumatic experience, I must tell you, and then fell asleep for about 20 hours because he was just so tired with jet lag and everything else. But the difficulty of living with another family and going to a completely different world and going into a high school with different sports and all the other factors is that for the first 3 to 6 weeks, you're a wonderful guest. They show you off to everybody. Our friend Annie from Africa. And they would take us around the show. But after a while, you're not in the family and you're not a guest. And you go through a period of a couple of months where they notice you drop your underpants in the corner, or you don't do this, or you do that, or you have a bit of a fallout with your equivalent American brother who you're staying with, and the mother doesn't know which sides to take, and that's a tricky period. And then you become a full member of the family, and that's quite an amazing step forward. And I had a fantastic year there again. Many speeches, many conventions we went to. Again, being good at sport helps. I lettered in athletics, swimming. I think I had the most points ever in swimming for the record for the school. It wasn't a big swimming school. I remember one time we had to break the ice in the pool to swim, and that was indoor pool. And I played American football. And it's an interesting story that when you try out, and about 300 or 400 kids in a high school try out, they keep on docking people off every day, and eventually you get down to a squad of 38 or 50 or whatever it is. And I stayed the course. But I kicked off, again being a kicker, I kicked off my very first game of American football. I kicked off. What people didn't understand in my class is I had never seen an American football game. And so I didn't understand a whole lot of the nuances that they did. And I remember kicking the ball and seeing it sailing into the end zone and so proud of myself, and then being wiped out by somebody who tackled me from nowhere. But I had a great time. I made all conference. I was an offensive tackle, a defensive guard, and I was the kicker. And I remember one of the headlines, and that's the only ego trip of this, is saying that Cudahy, which is the high school name, will win many games this year because they have a golden boot from South Africa to kick their field goals and things like that. Great year, fantastic year. First big romance with a girl who went on to be very high in the American government, and who I supposedly broke her heart according to the parents, but it's quite difficult to carry on long-term romances in those days without WhatsApp and all the things you have today. But that helped me to be independent, to be able to look after myself in a difficult environment, and to be gregarious and deal with people. And you went through the whole American experience, the prom, the homecoming dance, all those sort of things. And that was the period of Grease, the Grease movie. Now that's what it was. Half the guys in the school had slicked back rocker hair, and the other half were all preppy, and it was a wonderful experience. So that took up my sort of leaping from childhood to maturity of a kind. And then I came back. I couldn't go back to university when I came back. I remember I arrived on my parents' 25th wedding anniversary wearing a Stetson hat and speaking like an American, because you're forced to speak like an American. And I think that my parents are quite ashamed of me at that stage. But I came back, and it was arranged that I would go and work for a construction company for the 6 months before the university started. And so I joined that company and ended up as a land surveyor for them for 6 months. And they liked me so much they gave me a bursary to university to study engineering. And that was the first time, and that's another important part of your life. It's the first time you have your own car, first time you have a driver's license, the first time you have your own bank account. All those things happened at that time. And I loved every minute of construction, and that became, my future from there on in.
So just going back, obviously, to the youth side of things as well, did you ever get into some serious trouble?
I got stabbed with a bayonet in a knife fight, which you should have seen the other fellow though.
How old were you?
I would have been 19 then. Obviously, rugby at university was a big thing. Incidentally, that stabbing cost me a year at university. It was right before the exams, and I was in hospital and I couldn't write the first 2 exams, so I had to repeat first year engineering. So that had a negative effect on me at that time, and a negative effect on my mother, because when we finally, after a week, I was persuaded by the chief master at the university residence to tell my parents that I was in hospital, was stabbed. My mother fainted clean away on the phone. So, so that was a negative thing. Other than that, I couldn't say I got up to much mischief. Occasionally sneaking in, climbing over walls to watch Jack Nicklaus play against Gary Player on a golf course because I couldn't afford the ticket, things like that. Or the one horrible time when I was in America where I had to be, because your scholarship would be cancelled, I had to be absolutely squeaky clean. And we went to the movies one day, and I was the only one who paid to go in. There were about 12 of us. And I paid to go in, and then when the lights went down, I opened up the automatic door on the front, and all the rest came in. And when the lights went up for the first interval, we were the only 12 in the cinema, so we all got booted out. Little things like that, but nothing ugly. Nothing ugly.
So then, what was your first job, and do you remember how much you got paid for that?
Well, that 6 months I worked, they offered me 20 rand a month, or £1, and I balked at that, and they eventually paid me 30 rand a month. But I did a full engineer's job by the time I was finished. I lived at the YMCA, and the YMCA charged me 15 rand a month for full board, and I take a packed lunch. And I had the use of one company vehicle, the old station wagon, and I did all the errands as well as doing the land surveying. It was a massive job. You're getting old when you see that a huge interchange that we were building with 18 bridges and a canal is looking pretty worse for wear these days, because, my God, it's 60, 70 years old. You're getting a bit old on that. So that was the first job, and they say they gave me a bursary to university, and then thereafter, all my vacations, I worked for the company. I've erected tower cranes, I've rebuilt D8 bulldozer engines. Those are the days where you didn't have young people in South Africa were given responsibility you wouldn't have had elsewhere. I then wanted to do a commerce degree, and I moved to Johannesburg, and I joined LTA Construction, which was because it was right next to the university. And I joined that as an accounts clerk because I was trying to do a commerce degree in March 1968. By early 1969, they had transferred me down to the Port Elizabeth branch, now a town called Gaborone, and I was asked to go down to solve a problem. I went down and solved the problem. The MD of the company said, could Andrew stay on? So I got transferred to Port Elizabeth. Cerise was working for the Nuclear Physics Research Institute, and I must say at the outset, nobody quite understands or realizes just how intelligent Cerise is. I mean, she's way up in Mensa territory, and as I say, her best job was nuclear research. And she followed me, gave up this wonderful career, the best job she's ever had. And that was in, I say, sometime early in 1969. By early 1970, I was the director of the company, I was a financial director. And by 1973, I was the chief executive. My life's been pretty wonderful in many, many respects. But it has had stressful periods, and that was a stressful period. I was a sort of youngster. All the other directors were 45 to, the MD was 70, I think. And they all liked me. We used to play snooker every Monday after our management meetings, and it was a great team. Everything was teamwork. If a job was going wrong, we walked onto the job, and we walked the whole flat, and we looked at every issue, and we fixed it as a team. But the chief executive was transferred to Johannesburg, and he was asked who he thinks should run the business. And he said, me. I remember he called me around to his house on a Sunday, and we went round there, and he said, I'm going back to Johannesburg. That was a shock to us. And he said, I'd recommend that you take over as general manager to becoming a managing director. Now, we're employing 1,700 direct employees working in about 20 towns. We were building a new university. We had a huge amount of work on. I remember being worried about, I could see myself handling the work, but I was worried about whether I'd be able to project and sell new work to get new customers and clients. Anyway, world of unintended consequences. My mates, the fellow board members, when we sat down on the Monday morning and he said, I'm leaving, and he said, I'm making Andrew the general manager, they absolutely freaked out. Suddenly the youngster in the team that they always liked, who was always there Saturdays and Sundays to do work and help them and everything else, was suddenly in charge of them, and they did not like it a bit. So I lost 2 or 3 directors fairly quickly, promotion to other companies who were very successful, and I had to rebuild a team, and that was very difficult. Also, the fact is that I suddenly became vaulted onto the Master Builders Association, eventually became the youngest president. The problems there was that all the other contractors were all people in their 50s and 60s. And they tried to bully me out of going for contracts and doing all that sort of stuff. So it was quite stressful. And there was nobody really to talk to, except for Cerise. So that was one difficult period in my life. But we overcame it. I remember getting so stressed that once I went to the Desmond Mars White, who had the previous run the company, was still nominally chairman and came down once every couple of months to mentor me. And I remember going into his office one day and saying, there's so much pressure on me, I think that you may have made a mistake, and that would you prefer it if I resigned from the job and went back to being, where I was as the financial director? And I remember he turned to me and said, are you absolutely bloody mad? He said, I didn't put you into that position. I didn't think you could do it. You can do it. You must do it. Otherwise, you're letting me down. I'll never forget that But it was a stressful time, and then we were having children and all that sort of thing happening at that stage. So that was, you could say, the first career jump. LTA was owned basically by Anglo. It was a listed company, but it was owned by Anglo American, and I worked with them for 20 years. And fair play to when I resigned, because I got headhunted here in the UK. Anglo American flew me out to South Africa to the head office and gave me a farewell lunch. So obviously enjoyed those 20 years. I wonder whether if I'd stayed in South Africa or stayed on that job, what would have happened to me? I don't know. Life is like that. Why did what happened with my parents taking us to South Africa when I was 3? These things happen. You don't make many decisions in life. Things just happen. Enjoy it.
So that kind of fast forward a little bit into your work life, but so that kind of sums up the younger years. So in between the next segment, Tash wanted to ask if you can explain what happened when rushing to Ramsgate in a storm on the boat, trying to get her friend Miranda to the airport.
Look, I think you jumped probably one stage a bit too far forward, but understand that I like to think that the whole family, right the way through Cerise's family and mine, are generally unselfish people. They generally care for one another, they're empathetic. But unfortunately, there's one thing which is completely ununderstandable, I don't know if that's a correct word in English, but in my life, and that is that from the time I was a tiny tot, I've always wanted to be on a boat, in a boat. I remember our first long leave in the UK in 1953. I went to the Great British Exposition, or whatever it was, and they had a massive park in Battersea, and they had a boat pool, and you get little motorboats, and you drive around in circles, and they went on all the rides. I just drove this little motorboat around with a whole lot of florins or whatever I had to put in a meter box to keep it going. I've always been interested in boats. Now, I don't know what the milkman did or what happened, but consider my parents neither could swim. There's no nautical thing. So I selfishly have spent an awful lot of my money and my life in boating. We've done 70,000 miles in powerboats. I'm not sure that enthusiasm, in a selfish way, I don't think that enthusiasm was necessarily shared by my family, where they thought it was more terrifying than relaxing, although we had some wonderful times. But we went a cruise up to London once, and we were going along the south coast, and Natasha had a fantastic friend called Miranda, who's still a friend, and we went to a wedding in France later on, and she's taken up boating, funnily enough. And we were in Ramsgate Harbour, and we were due to go up the Thames to St Catherine's Dock. And the idea was to leave before the tide turned at 5 o'clock in the morning. So we woke up at 4:30 in the morning to get going, and we found we were moored in by about 5 yachts that had come in over the night, so we had to get rid of them. And as we were leaving Ramsgate Harbour, there was a yacht that called Mayday because it had lost its engine, and we got a tow line to them 1 second before they hit the rocks. So we got them off, we towed them in, and we put them alongside the pontoon, and we gave the 2 old boys who were on the boat, old boys probably half my age, gave them a cup of tea and got them, but that meant we missed the tide. So we went out from Ramsgate in monstrous seas with the whole family clinging on, looking terrified because they were. And I decided that when we turned to go north, that it was better to ride along the crest of the waves in the boat at speed rather than go slowly. And anybody who looks at the charts with a thing called overfalls around the headland there, North Foreland. And as we were coming along here, we were going quite fine, and suddenly the sea disappeared. We were in the air, and we came down from a height of about 20 feet into the water. And what that did was, I went high in the air and I came down, and my bucket seat I was in smashed to smithereens. So all I had was a steel pole. The rest of the family were washed off the back of the boat and stuck in the railings. Cerise had a torn shoulder and everything else. So from then on, it was mayhem to try and get into the Thames River. We turned the corner and everything settled down, and I could see the TV was smashed and stuff through the glass window looking down into the boat. So I said to Tash, go down, we better start cleaning up. And Tash went down and came back with eyes as big as saucers, because the flex of the boat as we'd hit that wave had shattered the armor glass in the front of the boat, to the extent that there was glass 30 feet behind it in our bed and all over the deck. And of course, every wave we'd gone through had come straight into the boat. The boat was total chaos. And then we started heading up the Thames. Everybody was in a state of shock. We just wanted to get in. And the customs launch came up alongside. Stop the boat, we wish to do an inspection. And I said, I'm not stopping the boat. I've got an injured wife. I'm going to take her to hospital. You must stop. We have powers. And I just put foot with the engine, and we shot up and they followed us for about 3 miles and gave up. I said, you can see our windscreens are shattered. We've had an accident. So I don't think that Miranda will ever forget that experience, nearly being washed off the boat by this giant wave and flying through the air. Now, there's been quite a few experiences about it, but I'd say it's my only selfish side, that I insisted on boating as much as I possibly could. My release.